Well, I think it's inevitable, really. The head of steam had built up so much. In politics, sometimes these things, you start with a bit of bravado, but in the end, it clearly looked like he was going to have to go. He was inflexible because of his position they had taken as personally, and so he was never going to do a deal with Alba. That was his only solution, and the Greens wouldn't go with him no matter what happened. So he was in a tight fix. He had to go. I must say, all the stuff he talks about, what he was keen on, and in fact, it doesn't look to me like the Scottish people were at all keen on. I mean, the the bill that he tried to put forward, which the British government had to stop in the end, was horrendous. It would have granted huge rights to trans women to basically bully their way into areas where, biological adult females were women.
No, don't use that. Don't give in to their terminology. Women.
No, I said, but biological adult females.
Not biological. There's only one kind. We're not a subset. We're just women.
I agree with you. I agree with you. My point is, when Sarah asked for a definition of woman, she's a woman because she's a biological adult female.
Yep.
That means that, other than that, you're something different. But the whole point was, all of that has led to the downfall, the arrogance in trying to impose this on them. And
but did you think it was interesting, though? He talked about how, integrity matters, values matters, and all of that stuff. But he talked about, hatred. I was absolutely stunned. Again, these people who apparently think... We have this a lot, don't we, with the Labour Party as well in England, but certainly with the SNP and with the Labour and the Lib Dems as well in Scotland. This idea that, the Scottish people are just intrinsically racist and horrible and full of hate, and that's why they need to have laws to stop them, committing hate crimes every day, even when they apparently don't realise it. But talked about how hatred continues and toxic culture wars and how it's the most marginalised who bear the brunt and we must resist populism. I mean, then he went on to say, I bear no ill will, no grudges against anyone. And you just think, yeah, you do.
Yeah, well, almost certainly he does. But the point was, I think that the Scottish nationalists had just got into a position where they thought they could do anything and it would go through, and it wasn't the case. And then, of course, this huge commitment they made to the Green agenda is going to cost the Scottish people, the whole of the Britain, by the way, including the present commitments that we've got, are mad in a way because they're just putting ideology ahead of reality. The reality is, until the technology's right, charging people what could be across the UK £1 trillion extra in taxation, or in Scotland a subset of that, is going to be damaging. And they've realised they're not going to reach it, but to get there, they'll apply a punishment beating in taxation and restrictions.
But also, Cyrian, the extraordinary irony that the SNP are basing their independence move, their bid, that's completely based on Scotland being able to support itself because of the income from the fossil fuel industry from the North Sea and in oil and gas, and at the same time basically trying to do away with that industry through their absurd climate change and net zero commitments. I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you? Can I just read you a statement from some of the Scottish Greens? The Scottish Greens, Patrick Harvey, co-leader of the party, has said the SNP is still the largest party in Parliament by some distance, and as the right to form a minority government, the Scottish Greens, he says, though, will work with any First Minister who shares, they say, our progressive values and who can secure our confidence. And he said that the Humza Yousaf successor should never take political allies for granted. So it looks like whoever is the next leader, it's more of the same, although that would suggest that Kate Forbes, who ran a very close battle to be the next, to take on from Nicola Sturgeon, the battle that Humza Yousaf finally won, that she would not be able to take that on, because I think she probably wouldn't sign up to all of the green nonsense and the trans ideological hatred.
Well, interestingly enough, she was attacked in a brutal way when she stood. Personal attacks, all sorts of allegations which were untrue. Even though she's in a different party, I did actually feel for her. And it's quite interesting, the Labour Party, a lot of the Labour Party up in Scotland voted for that bill, by the way, as well. It was only the Scots and a few
and the Lib Dems, that
voted against. They all did, and now all of a sudden they're backing off because of the Cass review that came up, finally said that you shouldn't let ideology by a few dominate reality and medical science by the many. And of course, that was the key point. So I don't know where the Labour Party go on this, because they were in support of a number of those issues up in Scotland.
Oh, well, they're just going to be fence-sitting or just, U-turning all the time the same way that Keir Starmer does. Can I also ask you about, I mean, we've had lots of texts and calls about this, but obviously we've been focusing on Scotland for the last 40 minutes or so. But these extraordinary scenes with Ireland, where we've got the Irish government demanding that Britain takes back asylum seekers who fled to Ireland amid fears they'll be deported to Rwanda. I think we're all pretty surprised that it had actually been any sort of impact in terms of actually deterring people from staying in the UK. We kind of thought people were coming on channel boats first of all, but the Irish say there's been an 80% increase, and those people are almost entirely, they are coming from Northern Ireland into the Republic of Ireland, coming south, having travelled freely to the country, because of course there's no hard border. I think that came up during Brexit negotiations, didn't it? But the British government has, I think quite rightly, and certainly our audience agrees, refused and said, look, we're willing to take those people back as long as you, as Ireland, part of the EU, agree with the rest of the EU that France has to take channel migrants back who've come to the UK. You're saying they're not your problem, Ireland? Well, we're saying they're not our problem either. What's your reaction to all of that, Sir Iain?
Well, when I stopped laughing, I did actually say, my goodness, isn't it wonderful when you're forced to eat your words? It's always a very good meal to watch as a spectator. And the truth is, Ireland weaponized the border during the course of the negotiations, as did Europe, not wanting any kind of checks on the border, and said that this would therefore be all about Ireland and Northern Ireland together. Then when the migrants start going over to Ireland, now all of a sudden they want checks at the border and they want to be able to send them back. But as we've asked France to do endlessly, let us send these people back to you, because they've crossed about 5 borders to get to us, and they should be going back to where they started. And so Rishi has the right, in a way, to feel, having been under the cosh over all of this, that ironically, Europe is now being forced to eat their own medicine. And interestingly enough, I noticed the president of the European Union has come out in the last 2 days saying they want to be able to send and process people in overseas territories, which makes you really wonder. Sometimes our media, not pointing the finger at you, but a lot of the media here have attacked Britain as though we are isolated, we are somehow a pariah, we will break these laws, when every other country is trying to do the same. We very rarely report that in the papers on the left, but we certainly should do, because we find we are going to be the leader on this, trying to stop the pull factor for the migrants, risking their lives and paying huge sums of money on the boats.
Indeed. So, Iain Duncan-Smith, thank you very much indeed. Former Conservative Party leader. Sorry, I'm Armstrong, just a quick word on that. I mean, again, we've been chuckling about this. Look, we all talk about real people and their lives, but we also talk about the impact of what those people do on other people's lives. And as I said, chickens have come home to roost for Ireland and the EU.
Yeah, and ultimately it's a story about gleeful politicians that delighted in making life as difficult for the UK and indeed Ireland as possible when we left the European Union. And now the chickens are coming home to roost and they don't like it up 'em.
Absolutely.